Many people think that you're going to get into your career, it's going to be a smooth road and you're not going to have those ups and downs. That's the furthest thing from the truth.
Why is it that by the type allows you to do proper revenue management, but by the unit doesn't?
We said to ourselves, we need to make the pivot. We could leverage all of our expertise so much more going down this path than the OTA path.
You were coming in against massive players, nationwide leaders, getting started in hospitality.
We proved very, very quickly that our model works. We're able to outperform the biggest players in the industry.
So a couple of questions there. This is super interesting. So first on the owner relations side. So just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, you would sign this contract with the developer, and would it be an exclusive management agreement for all the units, or you then had to convince each one of the owners, and then each one of the owners had the choice to go with you or with someone else?
Yeah, so in the United States specifically, there's laws that do not allow anybody to tell a home buyer you have to go into this program. That's illegal. So what we would do is we would sign an agreement with the developer to be an exclusive approved property management company. And what that means is that we have certain benefits, that we're able to provide our owners and renters that are not received by non-approved companies. So in essence, we have that capability. We also get the first introductions to people that were looking to rent and wanted to learn more about renting. So that was the benefits that we would receive from the developer, is that ability. And in most cases, the developer would select multiple approved companies, so it wasn't just us. It'd be two or three. So that's the benefits we would get from the developer. But then, with that being said, we cannot force a homeowner into an approved program, into our company, really anything. So what we had to then do is pitch to the homeowners individually why they wanted to come into our program versus renting on their own, through their own means or through a non-approved company. And so that would be what we call our contract sales approach, where we have dedicated people that would be the counterpart to the developer sales team. And when someone asks the developer sales team, how do I rent? How do I make money off this property? Developer sales team says, I can't talk about that, but I have approved rental companies over here that could answer your questions. And they would pass the lead off to us, and we would do our pitch to try to get them into the program.
Interesting. Got it. Makes sense. Okay, got it. Now on the second point, which was the distribution approach that you took, as far as not doing it by the door, but doing it by the unit type, what we on the vacation rental side know as the multi-unit approach in the PMS is that we use that. That's usually how it's called. And then there's smart calendar settings to synchronize the parent unit with the child units. I mean, the concept makes sense, right? You're renting a unit type, and then once you're checking in or whatever, you get assigned a specific unit. That makes sense. But why does that generate more money? Like, why was that? Like, you said most of the people that book are actually booking not a specific unit, but just a unit type. But that's like, the guest doesn't really know if they're booking one or the other. The guest is booking, right? The guest is booking a particular accommodation, right? So why does that translate to more revenue for you as the operator?
Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons. I could probably talk for an hour on that, but to keep that very high level, number one, when you look at how our property management system is built, they're built to either, build inventory by the door or by the type. Now, in some property management systems, you could create a parent and a child relationship in regards to the inventory, but that doesn't mean that both the parent and the child could be sent to third-party distribution channels. And that's where the restrictions lie. And so what we've done with our technology is it allows us to build it either by the door or by the type in the system and automatically distribute it wherever we want, either way, through an automated program. versus manual. So right now, like if you're using a property management system that's a vacation home one, most likely if you're building your inventory by the door, you're having to manually manage OTAs by the type, like Expedia, Booking.com, consortias, wholesalers, etc., or vice versa. You're going to have to manually manage your by the door inventory. It takes a lot of work, and it deters people from signing up a tremendous amount of channels and third-party distributions. So when you look at our program, I mean, we have hundreds of distribution partners that are all automated, and allows us to be a lot more efficient with where we're getting exposure and where we're getting bookings from. So like I was explaining before, if you're getting more exposure to a wider variety of the travel market, through these distribution channels, then we're able to get a lot more bookings. Number two, when you manage by the type, you can do true revenue management. When you're doing by the door, you can't. When I see exactly when a unit's booked, because it has an individual calendar for that unit, then it takes away the behind the scenes nature of supply demand, and it doesn't allow a hotel or a revenue manager to really play with yielding up and down. Your rates typically are visible for the entire year based on what week it is, and it really suppresses your ability to do true revenue management. So those were some of the key components of what allowed us to really generate a tremendous amount more revenue.
Can you define true revenue management? So why is it that by the type allows you to do proper revenue management, but by the unit doesn't?
So imagine, if I'm booking an individual unit and it gets booked a year out, it's booked. I can't do anything at that point. I'm not yielding up that unit. And if every single unit, let's say, has its own rates, then I'm not really able to play with supply and demand components to yield up rates or whatnot. Whereas when you're doing true revenue management, and it's based on a unit type where a renter doesn't necessarily know how many units you have behind it, you're able to play with things such as, number one, maybe you could get a certain base of business further out with your year out, 2 year out bookings. And then as you get closer to the date, you're yielding up, the units that are still available and getting much, much higher rates because you don't have as much supply. So just like anything in economics, when you have less supply, you're able to, theoretically, if the demand is there, raise your pricing. You can't do that if you have one unit and it's sold, it's gone. There's no playing with supply and demand. So that's one aspect of it. I think the other aspect of it is when someone doesn't know how much inventory is behind something, you're able to create urgency triggers, behind bookings, and you're able to say, hey, offers, book now and you get this. It's a limited time offer, or hey, there's only 2 left. Come book now before it's gone. So there's ways that you could really play with your rate yielding, in a way that's different when you're able to do it by the type because of the supply and demand components and the lack of exposure for the consumer to know exactly what's behind that inventory.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, wasn't there some pushback from the owners in terms of the owner thinking that it would actually be more beneficial for them to be on the by the by the by the unit approach, because they would think maybe, hey, well, how are you going to decide if you assign that booking to my unit or to another unit, and what if I end up being the cheapest booking instead? You see what I'm saying? Like, was that a concern from the homeowners?
I would say homeowners ask about that, but when we explain our program and how it works, I don't think it really becomes much of a concern. So
Mm-hmm.
just to clarify, we do book both by the door and by the type. If we book by the door and someone selects a specific unit, we don't move that booking. We just will have it where, it potentially affects the rotation of the by the type bookings that occur next. But we have an automated rotation system that takes into account net revenue to the owner. And so if someone does get a low rated booking at some point in the year, we have something that is taking into account rotation by month and by year, to where it averages out on the unit type what the net revenue is by owner, and we'll provide the next booking to the owner that has the lowest net revenue in their program, or in their home. So I think that we have a program that really helps us with even rotation. and ensuring that all owners are on a fair playing field. So, from that perspective, I don't think it really creates much concern.
Mm, that's interesting. Now, one question about distribution, because you mentioned being on hundreds of distribution channels, and I hear kind of two schools of thought, if you will, on this. There's those that think let's be on the most important ones and let's be great at those, and let's not even look at anything else. And then there's you, right, wanting to be on like as many as you possibly can get yourself on. Why do you think that's the wise approach, and what's the also downside that might come with trying to tackle that approach?
Yeah, so I think it's property specific. Certain properties. When I say we have hundreds of connectivity partners, not all of them are leveraged at every property. So that's
Mm.
something that I want to clarify. I would say that on every property basis, we probably have I would say approximately 30 channels at each property that would be the primary ones, depending on where that is geographically, what type of property, and what distribution channels appeal or provide the most booking generation for that type of property. So despite the fact that we have hundreds, we don't deploy all of them at every single property, to answer your question. I'm also a believer that, there's diminishing returns,
Mhm.
and we want to look at, putting our efforts, our marketing dollars and our time into the ones where we're going to get the biggest returns. So every property we go into, we identify what we feel will be the most lucrative channels. Maybe in the first year of opening a property, we might deploy more just to test that out further and then see which ones kind of hone in and become the top performers. But again, I would say on average, we probably have about 30 channels to 40 channels per property, the primary booking channels, at each individual resort.
Got it. Got
Yep.
it. Okay, that's very interesting. So that's phase one. So phase one, management company, not branded. This is what made you, successful, what we just covered. Phase two, now you're trying to be an OTA. I see a lot of people basically trying to come up with niche OTAs. You attempted it, then you realized that it was very hard to compete marketing budget wise with the large players. What was the takeaway there? Like, do you think there would have been a way for you to crack that code, and it was just a matter of getting extra funding? Is it are people delusional that are currently out there trying to beat Airbnb and whatnot? Like, what are your thoughts on that as a segment where there's opportunities or not for disruption?
Yeah. So let me kind of double back to my comment on the competitive nature. So I think that there were definitely avenues that we could take to compete. And I don't think that the marketing budget was the sole reason. I think that we could be very nimble and we could have competed very well in that space. I think probably the better reason to describe why we were not as bullish in continuing that is just we had more upside in the brand route. And I think that the brand route really takes advantage more of all of our expertise, because there really isn't a group out there that has done what we've done, where we have insight on the developer space, because of our family business. We've done in the last 8 years, in partnership with our family business, they've sold a few $1 billion worth of this type of real estate. So, having the insights and the learnings from a developer, on what makes sense, what doesn't, I think that's extremely unique for a company like ours. Then to have it where we're management and we have this fresh approach to management and branding, I think, no one's really doing. And then on top of that, to have it where we've created our own technology, and we have that component. No one's really, done that to the level of what we've done for this particular type of vacation
Mhm.
rental. So when you take, the component of we're real estate experts, we're management and hospitality experts, and we're technology experts, and put that all into one bucket, we're sitting there saying, what are we doing? And why are we trying to be an OTA, which so many people are trying to do, where we could really position the brand route and no one has that capability. And if someone wanted to, they're not going to be able to figure it out, because to find development expertise and expertise in what we've done, you're going to have to, if you're, for example, one of the big guys like a Marriott or a Hilton or an IHG, you can't hire people that have this expertise, because people that have this expertise are going to be running their own companies. They're not going to want to work for someone on payroll. So I think that, and even if you partnered with somebody, we have an 8-year head start. So I think that that's where we said to ourselves, we need to make the pivot because we could leverage all of our expertise so much more going down this path than the OTA path.
So it's basically looking at a red ocean that you could try to compete in and hopefully make it, or look at a blue ocean where you had a very unique approach, a very unique set of skills and
Yeah.
backgrounds, and just go all in on that.
Yeah, we could be one of one, or we could be one of thousands. And we said, let's be one of one and really leverage our capabilities that are super unique and no one could really replicate at the moment.
Interesting. Now, on that third model, right, the branded consulting and then branded management. I don't know if I described that correctly, but especially specifically around the consulting part, what would you say are some of the mistakes that you see developers making that you try to advise them not to make?
Oof, there's a lot. Many developers, I'm blown away by how they purchase land and how they do underwriting of their properties. There's very little science to no science behind it. I've been in meetings with developers that you ask them, how did you come up with your RevPAR? They said, well, I really, based on my construction costs, I really needed a RevPAR of this. So I just tweaked my ADR and occupancy up because that's what the model said I needed to do to make the numbers work. And I look at those people and I say, that's not how this works, guys. There's a lot more that goes into, that you could just get destroyed if you don't have a science behind it. So I think number one, there's so many developers out there where it's the Wild West. They purchase something, they don't really have it well thought out or have the expertise in the space, and they don't know how to do the underwriting. So I think that's a big component of where we help developers a lot. Number two, we have a legal structure on how to position these properties to really limit or eliminate, I should say, the liability for the developer. Very few, if any, developers we've come in contact with have that expertise. So that's another big area that we help them avoid pitfalls and issues. Also just how to maximize the site plan, how to really maximize the units themselves, where to put amenities, how to phase these properties. Again, a lot of people don't really understand that when it comes to vacation rental resort. There's a unique way in doing that so that you can keep high velocity of sales while also keeping a healthy operation side of the business. Keep in mind, you might be operating part of your resort before you're done selling, depending on the phasing. So there's a lot of science that goes into that so that, your underwriting comes to fruition properly there. So I would say those are some of the main areas that we really help the developer. But when you think of our pre-opening services, think of it as very similar to how the big brands create, they provide a playbook to a developer. When you go and you want to do a Marriott, Hilton, IHG, Hyatt, you don't just go build it and then open the doors and slap the name on it. They come to you with the whole playbook on here's how you do everything and here's what we know works. That's exactly what we provide our development partners, is the playbook on how to build a residential resort and how to position it.
Okay, got it. So in terms of the underwriting, okay, so again, we'll tackle them one by one. So the underwriting piece, of course, don't just increase the RevPAR until the numbers work. That's not the right approach. What are the things would you say you see a lot on the underwriting part specifically? I'm curious around the capital structures, like the whole financing of it all. Like what does that tend to look like most of the times when you're looking at this large scale development? Is it traditional debt? Is it just limited partners? Is it a mix? Is it like and maybe mistakes or suggestions you tend to provide around financing specifically?
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer because every deal is unique and different. Some deals have access to maybe government incentives or whatever it might be, whether it be local or federal. So that obviously plays a big role in financing these type of properties. That'd be one of the first things that we'll help with is seeing what government incentives are available in those markets and for that type of property, because that will drastically change the way that we would approach a cap stack. The other thing that we would typically look for is that a state in which you could use usable deposits as part of your equity stack. In the state of Florida, as an example, you can do that. So, you could very much drastically lower your peak equity requirements by having healthy sales deposits that you could put towards equity on the project to lower your debt needs. When it comes to the debt, right now the hot thing in the market's preferred equity. That's been kind of the main mechanism that we've been seeing on the debt side. Bank debt's been a lot harder to get, and whatnot. Also, just in general, what we've been seeing is that maybe prior to a year or two ago, there were very few hotels coming up that had resi as a component to it. Whereas nowadays, I would say, a typical lender probably would see more than 50% of their hotel deals coming in with resi as a component, again, to really help to offset some of the equity needs through those usable deposits and whatnot. So those are some of the things that we're seeing a lot of. I think you had asked also, what are some of the things that people are doing incorrectly? Or I just want to clarify that second part of that question.
Yeah. Well, really, it was just like either incorrectly or what you see most often, which you just talked about. But
Yeah,
yes,
I
you're
would
right.
say,
I mean, it's very unique to the deal, but I was more so, just trying to get a sense of like how this kind of large scale deals are traditionally financed.
okay. Yeah, I would say that what I said probably satisfies that question.
Yeah. Absolutely. Makes sense. And let's say at a scale that's not as big, like do you see or not necessarily at a scale that's not as big, but just in general, do you see there being any appetite from traditional banking institutions to let's say maybe refinance these assets after they're stabilized or after they've had uh, revenue for a couple of years, and is that something that you will advice as well, or does it tend to be more of a stack that's fixed rather than like on the multifamily side, or on the smaller scale side? You hear a lot about the buy, renovate, rent, repeat,
Mhm.
and that being a way for you to kind of grow your portfolio. Is that something that the big developers do too, or they just don't have that need?
Yeah, no, of course. I think it depends on the developer you're talking to. Everyone has a different criteria on how much leverage they're looking to bring in, and how they want to formulate their cap stacks and whatnot. But so again, you see different appetites depending on who you're talking to. I will say that when it comes to who is lending to these type of deals, I would say right now it's changing a lot. If you looked 2 years ago, there was really nobody that was looking at this space. It was kind of in the early stages, and people didn't really know what to do with it. I think that a lot of investors started to see built to rent, long-term rental houses, and that's been around for quite some time, and that's still foreign to a lot of people. So when you start talking about short-term rentals, I would say that's a newer thing for most investors. In the last couple of years, we have seen some family offices and some institutions getting behind it. I wouldn't say that it's traditional banks. I think that's something that we'll start to see probably in the near future. So right now, I would say the people that are lending to this is more of the you know very creative financial institutions, family offices, private equity firms, things like that are starting to look for diversification of assets. And a lot of people that have invested in the BTR long-term rental are starting to see the upside you can get from a short-term rental, and I think that's where you'll start to see a lot of them start to translate into this space as well.
We'll wrap it up here. I could go on. As you can see, this is super fun, super interesting, and I
Yeah.
love the insights you've shared. But thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Nick, for taking the time. We might have to do a part two because this is
Yeah.
so interesting. But
Yeah. Happy to do
again,
it.
thank you so much for taking the time. Where's a good place for people to connect?
Yeah. So on LinkedIn, Nicholas Falcone would be the name to search up on LinkedIn, or yeah, that would probably be the best place. So I would say that, or you can go to our websites, rentalresorts.com, and rental is spelled RENTYL, resorts.com. Would probably be the two best places to find us.
Awesome, Nicholas. Thank you so much. Very eye opening, very interesting, very inspiring. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll stay in touch. Okay.
Yeah, Sebastian, thank you for the time, and I look forward to part two.